Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cobblestones Chronicles, Episode 1. I'm Jeanette Wallace-Gedge, and in this programme, I'll be telling you the stories behind Cobblestones Museum. But first of all, some background about Cobblestones. So Cobblestones is a regional museum celebrating the history of the Wairarapa. The museum and our early settlers' village are at 169 Main Street in Greytown. We'll be bringing you stories about the items in the collection and about the buildings that are part of the collection. We've got 6 Category 2 heritage listed buildings from all around the Wairarapa. That's why we think of ourselves as a regional museum. A lot of the items in the collection have been gifted or lent to us and date back to the early days of European settlement and the development of the Wairarapa. We'll be talking about each of the buildings throughout the programme, and we'll be bringing history alive through our stories. We'll also be delving into the stories behind the names of some of our streets. Thanks to Gareth Winter, we've got a lot of information in his book Streetwise, which is excellent to tell us all these stories. The first street I'm going to talk about is Church Street in Greytown. It's pretty obvious where it got its name from, as St Luke's Church is on the corner. But as you pass through Greytown, you probably notice there's a giant gum tree in front of the church. So here's the story of how that gum tree came to be in Greytown. It was researched and published in 1991, and I'm indebted to Mrs. Mary Fife for permission to read it on this show. I'll also be playing some music that's been written in New Zealand about New Zealand. And I'll confess right now that I really enjoy folk music. Folks often telling stories about real events. So before I read the story of the gum tree, here's a song that has echoes of the farming life in New Zealand and the changes that have happened over the years. The Shrub and the Blackberry, sung by Mike Harding, written by Paul Bond. It was recorded in the 1990s, but it's a much older song than that. Here it is.
Lived so long, far in the back country, hidden in the rushes, the scrub and the blackberry. Muddy paths and potholes, tractor tracks and post holes, mossy battens dangling there on the wire, and the open fire, 6-inch nails and hay bales, waratahs and slip rails, dogs and children yapping away in your ear. And the air so clear. Here's to the home I've lived so long, far in the back country, hidden in the rushes, the scrub and the blackberry. Days of chipping thistles, curses and dog whistles, crouching in the yard with the flash of the shears. As the evening nears, talking round the table, loud guffaws and babble. Families now split up and splintered like kindling wood. But the life was good. Here's to the home I've lived so long, far in the back country, hidden in the rushes, the scrub and the blackberry. Here's to the home I've lived so long.
That was Mike Harding in The Home I've Lived So Long. Beautiful song, isn't it? I'm going to read the story of the St. Luke's gum and how it came to Greytown, because one of the things about Greytown is that we've got so many trees there, and they've always been important, and some of the largest oaks in New Zealand grow there. And the oaks were said to have been grown from acorns carried in the pocket of a member of the very first party of Small Farms Association settlers to Greytown, Ben Stevens. And Greytown became the first New Zealand town to celebrate Arbor Day. This happened on the 3rd of July 1890. Greytown Mayor of the day, Richard Wakeland, planted the first tree. The special tree, the gum tree, though, came to Greytown by nefarious means. It was stolen. The St. Luke's gum tree can be seen towering over the church on the corner of Main and Church Streets. It stood there since 1856 and has been called Greytown's oldest settler. The secretary of the Small Farms Association in 1854, after whom Charles Rookin Carter, after whom Carterton and Wellington's Carter Observatory are named, visited Sydney on business. While he was in Sydney, Carter ordered a dozen Eucalyptus regnans yearling seedlings to bring home with him, which he intended to plant on his Parkvale property, 4 or 5 miles north of Greytown. Also in Sydney, Carter met a disillusioned digger from the Victorian goldfields. He was looking for some farmland, and he decided to try his luck. But he wasn't really enjoying being on the Victorian gold diggings. So he was not very happy about it, and this ferment came to a head in Ballarat on the 3rd of December, when the rebellious diggers erected a stockade at Eureka. Carter met Samuel Oates, and he said he was always on the lookout for likely settlers to Wellington. So in the end, Samuel Oates arrived in Wellington, and Carter was trying to find somebody to bring the gum trees over the hill, and he offered to help Samuel Oates buy an additional 2 acres of land by agreeing to bring everything over the hill on a big wheelbarrow. So can you imagine what it must have been like bringing a wheelbarrow over the Rimutakas? So it was that Samuel Oates earned his place in Wairarapa history. He also agreed to carry the first official mail to the small farm settlement in Greytown. So off he set with his big barrow laden with tools, provisions, gum tree seedlings, and some letters. The first part was okay, but the closer he got to the hill, the worse the road came. So it was really difficult. There were often mud, rivers, goodness knows what. Eventually, together with another traveller, they reached Greytown, where they paused at Thomas Kempton's Rising Sun Hotel, which was just opposite where Cobblestones is today. They parked the barrow outside and went into the bar. According to the legend, this is where they met the verger, a mythical, keen gardening sort of fellow who became Greytown's first green activist. Unbeknown to the travellers, the verger nipped outside and helped himself to 3 of the gum tree seedlings. Oates and his fellow traveller Fairweather left the pub and wheeled their load on northwards. Later, Oates was horrified to discover 3 of the seedlings were missing. Nevertheless, he replanted the remaining 9 on Carter's Parkvale Farm Road frontage, where they flourished until about the turn of the century. Years later, when Carter, now a Member of Parliament, happened to be visiting Greytown, his attention was caught by the St Luke's gum tree. Lo and behold, this proved to be a particularly fine example of the same species of gum tree as were growing so well on his home property. Carter remembered the missing 3 seedlings, and upon inquiry about the town, was not really surprised to discover 2 more, one growing in front of Postmaster Samuel Mole's house in West Street, and another growing in the old cemetery reserve in East Street. Further inquiries brought to light the shadowy figure of the verger, said to be a gardener who had charge of the Main and Church Street corner section that had been set aside for the building in 1868 of St Luke's Church. Of the 3 pinch trees, the one in West Street grew to become the largest. When it was felled in 1837, thinking it was an earthquake, people rushed out of the main tree shops. The the tree known as Mowry Charlie's tree was the smallest in the cemetery. It was felled in the 1960s. So of the 12 gum tree seedlings bought in Samuel Oates' wheelbarrow, only the St Luke's tree has survived. And so recently we've put together, in Greytown, a plan to make sure that the gum tree outside St Luke's survived for a bit longer, which is really important. We love our trees. I also want to tell the story of cobblestones. So why is cobblestones called cobblestones? Well, the buildings originated around the original Hastwell stables. They were one of several stables erected in Greytown in 1857, when the original cobblestones were also laid. So up until 1880, the stables were the region's hub for Cobb and Co. horse-drawn coaches departing from Wellington and coming from Wellington, and the Hastwell coaches served the Wairarapa. Up to 70 horses were grazed overnight on that site, while the coachman, as well as Mr. Samuel Oates, enjoyed the hospitality of the Rising Sun Hotel just across the road on the other side of the highway. You can imagine what the roads were like in those days. They were very muddy, often or very dusty, big ruts in them. So having the cobbles as the resting place in front of the stables was really important. I cannot imagine what it was like coming over the Rimatakas in a coach drawn by horses. So we still have the original cobbles in cobblestones, hence the name. I actually heard a story this weekend about cobbles. They are laid sideways, not flat to the ground. So the end goes in first, so they are flattish stones, but so that the ends go in and poke up, so they lock together and don't move. And of course, over time, it becomes very solid. If you do go to Cobblestones, please don't try and move them, but you will see that they're still walked on today. The Haswell Stables is the one building that was built on the site originally. All the other buildings have been moved onto the site, and it's great that we have buildings in our care from all over the Wairarapa. We also have conservation plans for each of our 6 heritage listed buildings to make sure that we take good care of them and that they are conserved for future generations. We've recently finished doing the woolshed, which was moved from Masterton actually, and we'll be telling you more about each of the buildings in future programmes. There's over 2 acres of grounds, so there's loads of room for you to roam around and even enjoy a picnic in our lovely gardens. As I said, I want to tell you stories behind the interesting objects from our collection, as well as the buildings. We have a lot of very curious objects, and one of our former trustees, Brian Baxter, has researched their stories. You might have read some of these in the Wairarapa Times Age occasionally. So today I want to tell you the story of a briefcase. It's an attractive briefcase with the initials FC embossed in gold on the front. And if you are watching on the website or YTV, I'm just about to put up a picture of the briefcase so you can see it. This beautiful leather briefcase belonged to Fanny Collier, who was better known as Irene Collier for some reason. The Collier sisters, Irene and Marjorie, attended Greytown School in the early 1900s after they had emigrated to New Zealand with their father and mother. They both also later taught at the school. They were both good tennis players and were members of the Martinborough Golf Club. They were clearly pioneers in women's sport. It wasn't so long ago that women's sport was frowned upon, believe it or not, and even the Olympics banned women until 1900. And even then, they were only allowed to participate in tennis and golf. Perhaps that's where the Collier sisters got their particular sporting interests. Women's athletics debuted at the Olympics in 1928. Very exciting. But women only competed in the 100 metres, the 800 metres, the high jump and the discus. The 800-metre race was controversial, with some competitors becoming exhausted and unable to complete the race. So the women's 800 was removed from subsequent Olympics and didn't reappear again until 1960. Golf, of course, returned to the Olympics in 2016, having been finished since 1900. Did you know the only Olympic sport where men and women truly compete against each other is in the 3 equestrian events: dressage, jumping and eventing? It's good to see women are well represented in our New Zealand Olympic team these days. At Cobblestones, we are so lucky in having a lot of information in our archives, and you can see more about the Collier family in the newest exhibition at Cobblestones, A Tale of Two Trunks. We've got the trunks from 2 different men who immigrated to the Wairarapa around about the same time. Mr. Edward Collier and his family, including Fanny, and Mr. Lars Schuh, who emigrated from Denmark. It's well worth going to see what's going on, and it's open now. So to finish this programme, a bit about me, your programme presenter. You might have guessed from my voice that I'm not a New Zealand born. I was born in Scotland in a little place called Lennoxtown in the Campsie Fells, north of Glasgow. I came to New Zealand in 1983, supposedly for my 3 years OE, but fell in love with this country, and a few years later I fell in love with a good New Zealand bloke. He's fifth generation, descended from Swedish, Danish, English and Scottish settlers, like many New Zealanders, a real mixture. His earliest ancestors came in 1830s, and through him I've learned a lot about the early days of European settlement. So I want to end this first programme with a song that he wrote. It's called My Father's People. It's about his family, but it could be the story of almost any New Zealand family. I'm looking forward to sharing more stories in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you for listening today. And here's Niels' song, My Father's People.
My father's people cleared a forest, drained all the swamps, broke in the farms by the old Taupo Road. We baled in summer, fed out in winter, hand-fed the calves. Sundays down at the hall, Mrs. Mac played the sweet by and by, and old Pop Finley was still waiting on the lawn to lift him up to his home in the sky. Time came, we moved to the city, packed a big truck, drove over the hill. But deep down inside, we were sons of the forest. Guess in my heart I'm living there still. Mrs. Mac, hair in a bun, upright as her old piano. I hear her daughter is living in Sydney. Last week her grandson emailed from Rio. Those barefoot days, the shadows now, that walk so short in the high noon garden. But later today, I swear they did lengthen as the sun was setting west of Eden. There's a place I go, you can't map it on Google. Place I go, you can't get there by car. Place I go, might find my brother. And the place I go, it's a place in my heart. Sunday down at the home, Mrs. Mac played the sweet by and by, and old Pop Finley was still waiting on the lawn to lift him up to his home in the sky. To lift him up to his home in the sky.
And that was Niels Gedge singing My Father's People. And one of his ancestors actually farmed up at Maharahara in the northern part of the Wairarapa, so it's very appropriate to play that song. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to talking to you again in 2 weeks' time. You can also have a look on the website today and see some pictures of some of the things that I've been talking about. Thank you very much. Goodbye.